We are going to talk about pathological demand avoidance. First, we're going to hear from a voicemail call-in. Remember that if you want your question answered on the podcast, you can call 833-281-2343. We always link this in the show notes, so don't worry about remembering it here. But let's hear a voicemail from Jenna, and then we're going to talk about PDA. Here we go.
Hi, Kristen. My name is Jenna. I am a mom of 3 living in southern rural Virginia, and our oldest 2 are adopted from foster care, and we have a biological child. And my oldest has really severe ADHD, which actually, even though he's adopted, learning more about him made me seek my own diagnosis. So I've been diagnosed for 2 years. And one of the biggest things I see that he struggles with is perceived demand avoidance, PDA. A lot of kids are often diagnosed with oppositional defiance, ODD, but I don't think that's fair to do to neurodivergent kids. And I see a little bit of that in me. And so going to therapy in the past, they mainly try to do CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, but that doesn't work because that just gives me more demands on an already overwhelmed system. Yeah. And I feel that way about joining something like Focus that you give. No doubt you do help so many people and you can help so many people, but that feels like another task that I have to complete in my already overwhelmed life of being a mom of 3, working full-time, and a mom of neurodivergent kids with trauma. So I was just wondering if you could touch on that. What does PDA look like? What does it mean? And how do we overcome that? Because it can stand as a barrier to us taking care of ourselves when someone else suggests something that we should do for ourselves. So thanks.
Oh my goodness. I'm so glad you asked this, Jenna. Thank you so much for calling in. So I need to say right off the bat, I am not an expert in PDA. I have been researching it, and I also see it in one of my kiddos. So I'm going to talk through that lens as someone who has done some research. I follow some PDA accounts on Instagram. My favorite one is @PeaceParents. That one is a really, really good informative one. I have a couple PDA, they refer to themselves, and so I'm going to refer to them as PDAers. So it's like ADHDer, but like pathological demand avoidance, PDAers. So I have a couple PDAers in Focused who have really educated me on this subject. And I intend to have a guest expert come on and talk about it. So these are my disclaimers, okay? I intend to have somebody come on and talk about it from the autistic experience, from the experience of someone with pathological demand avoidance, or sometimes it's called persistent drive for autonomy. I'm not an expert, but I have been researching it, and I believe that one of my children is PDA. And so we've totally changed our parenting style with him, and it's made a huge difference. So that's the perspective that I'm coming from. Okay. The first thing we need to understand and know is that it is currently under the umbrella of autism, not ADHD. This is not to say that people with ADHD don't experience pathological demand avoidance, but it is a profile of autism right now. And so there's a huge overlap between autism and ADHD, so it makes sense that ADHDers might struggle with it, but it's really important that we, or that I am clear that PDA is a profile of autism. It's not an official diagnosis in the US. It is something that is like coming to the forefront that we're beginning to learn about, we're beginning to understand. And hopefully the autistic and PDA community are the ones like leading the charge on that. As with everything else with neurodivergence, like it's really difficult and hard and like upsetting when neurotypical people are the ones talking about the specific neurodivergence, because someone who's neurotypical is just approaching it from a completely different lens. And so we want to make sure that we're allowing the people who experience it to drive the conversation about it, which is why I'm going to have somebody come on. I've asked her to come on, and we're working on scheduling. So the best way that I can describe pathological demand avoidance is it's actually a nervous system disability where the PDA person's nervous system literally goes into fight or flight at a perceived demand or loss of autonomy or control. Whenever there is a perception that a demand is being placed on them, or when there's a loss of autonomy, when they don't have control, when they're not in charge of their own space, of their own body, of their own day and schedule, their nervous system goes into fight or flight. So this can lead to very oppositional behavior. Absolutely. There's literally a temper tantrum, a meltdown at the perception that their autonomy or their control is being taken away. What this often looks like in kids and what I saw in my own sweet, wonderful, perfect child is that he wanted to be in charge of everything from the moment that he came out of the womb. He was not like other kids. And I was parenting alongside of other women, my friends, who were also having babies. And my baby was not like their baby. And I didn't get it. I didn't understand. I don't understand why my child's not sleeping. I don't understand why my child's crying all the time. I don't understand why my child is like having like he's waking up from a nap and he's having a meltdown that sounds like a night terror, like a terror. I did not understand. I also didn't understand how much my child was masking. So my sweet child would go to a babysitter, or they would go to a friend's house, or they would go to a family member's house, and they would be easy. They would be so easy. They would be so easy. And the person who was watching them would be like, I don't really know what you're talking about because like he's so easy. And then I would bring my child home and they would melt down and they would be defiant, or what seemed like defiance. They would want to be in charge of it. What I know now is that because I was his safe place and I was the person that he could be himself with, he was allowing his nervous system to go to like be honest. And he wasn't having to mask like he did at, a family member's house or at a friend's house. So it looks like in a child, it looks like a lot of meltdowns, but it can also look like refusal to do basic things like eat or sleep or toilet regularly. So it can be very, very concerning. And again, I don't know enough about it. My child never got to that stage in his childhood where he did not ever get into the stage where he was refusing to eat, refusing to sleep, or refusing to toilet. However, there was a period of time in his adolescence, and this is when we began to aggressively pursue a diagnosis. There was a period of time in his adolescence when he did resist these things, when he was in what looked like burnout, when I couldn't figure out why my kiddo was isolating, wasn't functioning, couldn't get out of bed, wasn't able to do any of the quote unquote normal regular tasks. He was exhausted all the time. He was engaging in behaviors that were not helpful to him, that were actually harmful to him. And so when, by the grace of God, one of my focused clients posted about pathological demand avoidance in our community, I started to cry as I read the research because I was like, oh, this is my kid. This is my kid. When something feels like a demand, even if it's something that he wants to do, his nervous system freaks out. Even if it's like something that he knows that he needs, and it's like, I need to eat. And then he's like, you can't tell me what to do. It's like this internal freak out and battle. It's not their fault. It's not something they can control. And it's extremely debilitating. Oh, this is a lot. Michelle, are you getting more than you bargained for? I'm really happy to be talking about this because, like I said, I've been wanting to have a whole episode on this topic. And I really want people with ADHD to begin to look into it. You can Google PDA. You can Google pathological demand avoidance. You can Google persistent drive for autonomy, and also begin to follow autistic creators who fit this profile, because that's really going to help you to understand. The demands that PDAers resist can be internal. They don't have to be external. And they do a ton of masking, which is why they go into burnout, because they know what's normal. They know what they should do. They know what's good for them. They know what the rules are. And so they spend so much time forcing themselves to do the typical, the normal, the right, the good, like everything in society that says that this is what you're supposed to do. And then they burn themselves out. Okay. So let me tell you what we began to do differently as we realized what our child was experiencing. We actually lowered demands for him, meaning we took away a lot of rules. A lot of rules. Greg and I like rules. We're both type A people. We're both pretty uptight. We both like things to be black and white for different reasons. We both we want things to be a certain way. And we've parented that way. And our child has not thrived in that environment. And while it seemed like logically he's not meeting expectations, so we should create more rules, pathological demand avoidance is actually the way that you kind of treat it or work with it. It's very counterintuitive. You actually lower demands. We took away all screen time, most screen time restrictions. We started doing everything for him. Now, this was just a short period of time, but while he was in like a not a great place, we started doing just everything. I did his laundry. I cleaned his room. I just lovingly, happily served him. And that helped him to get out of like this burnout stage. I just became someone who stopped telling him what to do. I rarely told the child what to do. I rarely looked at it. I tried to take away every single demand and just create a safe environment for him and let him be himself. And someone with pathological demand avoidance is going to thrive in an environment where they can be them. I don't know enough about it to speak to it specifically, like here are the steps to do, but I can tell you what helped me was lowering demands for my kid. I lowered a ton of demands. I give him control as much as possible. I rarely tell him what to do. I ask him if he wants to do it. And sometimes he can perceive that as a demand. When I'm asking him to do something, he knows that I'm actually telling him. And so I've even had to work on that, like not being manipulative and pretending that I'm asking when I'm really telling, but working on my soul at my core, being like, no, he gets to decide. He gets to decide. And I will tell you that in a year of parenting him in this different way, I guess it's been a year and a half now, he's a completely different person, taking so much more responsibility for himself and doing things in a way that I am just so proud of. Not that that is the point of his life to make me proud. It is absolutely not. But as I observe him existing as a human, I'm so freaking proud of him. It is so amazing. And so I just want to say to everyone, if you are resonating with like when a demand is placed on you, even if it is a demand inside of you and you start to freak out, look up PDA. Look up pathological demand avoidance or pervasive drive for autonomy. Start to follow autistic creators who talk about their own experience of PDA if they have the PDA profile, and start to just learn more about it. I want to say to you, Michelle, that understanding as an adult, like Obviously, you have a lot of demands placed on your life, but how can you lower demands for yourself? How can you practice low demand parenting with your child? And how can you practice low demand reparenting with yourself? How can you talk to yourself in a way that is nurturing and gentle and gives you choice and autonomy? So much about PDA is the absolute need to have choice and autonomy. It is not optional. It's not optional. People who are PDA, they absolutely must have choice and autonomy. So how can you give that to your child in a safe way? Obviously, kids need boundaries and rules to keep them safe. But how can you give your child as much autonomy as possible, as much choice as possible? How can you lower demands to the best of your ability? How can you do your best to lower demands for your child? And then how can you do it for yourself? How can you give yourself as much autonomy as possible, as much choice as possible, as much, as few demands as possible? And I understand, like, joining a community like Focused, knowing that it's a coaching program, knowing that, like, if you're going to get anything out of it, you do have to, like, participate at least to a very small degree. That can really feel like a demand. And I would encourage you, if you're wanting to join, if you're thinking about joining, to maybe ask yourself, what demands can I lower for myself in other areas to make room for something like Focused? Because I agree with you, just adding it in and adding in the pressure and adding in the expectation and adding in the demands, like, you might want to do some work on the forefront first before doing that, because I agree that adding it in might just overwhelm your system. So in what areas can you lower demands? What can you let go of? That, like, okay, I'm telling myself I have to do this, but maybe I don't have to do this thing over here. And eliminating that will make room for a self-development program like Focused. I'm just really curious about that.